right, well, I think a toast would be in order. The end of the world as we know it, because of Ebola or ISIS or whatever.
I heard beer keeps it out of your blood.
Shit hits the fan scenario. Solar flares, EMP. I would assume that you gentlemen with Special Forces training would know what to do with yourselves and your family if, here we are in New York City, there was a bleed out of the population, you've got to get out and get out fast. Let's talk about where your training would come in and what you specifically would do living here in New York City if you had to get out and get out fast.
Battlefield recovery.
Yeah. Snatch your car and go.
Take other.
If you're in the
stuff.
city, you mean? I live close to here, pretty close, and I already have I have a combo plan. If I can't make contact with my wife, if she's stuck here, I'm here. We have a couple of those pace plans where we can do that. Where I live too is in the woods, and there's nothing behind me but a ridge line.
See, now it's funny you say that because Rick Iannucci said to me, he said, "Brother, you got to have a pace plan: primary, alternate, contingent, emergency, right?"
Yep.
See.
See, now you know.
See, now I know.
And mine's not even that good, but it's you know, things you don't want to be paranoid. You just got to do a little bit of forethought on it. And so, like, I live up in the woods, and there's nothing behind me but a ridge line. I live right by a big creek. I have a water supply. I got guns. I got a bow. I can get food. And I've even talked to some of my neighbors, because up where I live, you think this is, live New York City, and it is. By the way, this is all going to fall apart. But where I am, there's a lot of hunters and a lot of outdoor people. And we've already talked about how to secure our neighborhood and to keep people from coming in, because it is going to be like that. This is all going to fragment, and it's the whole bunch of people are going to die, and the rest of them are going to go out, and they're going to take with them. Man, do you remember I don't know if you were here, but when the hurricane came?
Sandy.
Right. People were pulling guns out at gas stations in Hoboken.
Yeah.
I mean,
it got very violent.
Right. And
right outside the city.
And this quick. Imagine cutting off water, electricity, and all this kind of stuff just for a couple days in here. It becomes Planet of the Apes, bro. It becomes
so let me ask you.
Soylent Green, Omega Man, all that kind of stuff.
You talked about the fairness of the corporate world, with The Walking Dead being so popular and all of these things. When you have seen the world absent of fairness. Do you think the majority of the population is prepared to see a world without fairness?
Good question.
No, not at all. A lot of them will just lay down and die.
Crumble.
Unfortunately, it's like Hurricane Katrina. There are a lot of people who just went out in their front lawn and died of exposure because they didn't know how to survive. They didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So it's not like necessarily I think every person in America is going to become Animal Man. I think it's actually quite the opposite. A lot of them are going to lay down and die because they don't know what else to do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Do you think back when they actually said, here's a knife, there's a goat, go to town, that people were more prepared to become animals if they had to be?
Yeah, but for different reasons. Jack and I actually had this conversation before. In the earlier days, when I came through the Special Forces Training Group, for example, you mentioned, the electronic pulse, right? It's the biggest thing. We lose all our communications. You earlier mentioned communications, how important that is, right? Well, we used to train and put caches all over the world with older radio sets that had those tubes, like the old TV sets, because they're not impacted.
Yeah, vacuum tubes.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not impacted.
Older vehicles, older weapons?
No. We can still communicate. We used to train, and they probably still do, with antenna theory and how to AM, amplitude modulated, so you can still communicate with Morse code. And those caches were put in place 30, 40, 50 years ago. They're still out there.
Yeah.
We'll still be able to communicate. We will. The people in general tend to migrate to strength and survivors. And so the natural leaders will come to the surface, in my opinion. And there will be some battlefield recovery. And they'll still be able to communicate. We will. Because of Army Special Forces and old school training.
Now, did you learn anything about bushcraft and trapping animals and surviving on whatever's there?
Oh yeah, sure. In SEER school, every Special Forces guy learns basic survival. It's like a week of survival out in the woods, so it's not like it's not going to turn you into Daniel Boone or anything like that. But yeah, some basic survival techniques, absolutely.
I think what happens with society, though, and I never went to SEER school because it wasn't part of my pipeline.
Holy
never
shit.
gone. Yep, never went. But you know, the thing is, the higher society gets above nature with electronics and technology and stuff like that. When the collapse comes,
You can't LOL or tweet out your
right. But the higher we remove ourselves from that ground of reality and nature, the bigger the fall when all the things we built it on goes away.
The more educated and the more intellectual the person is, often the harder time they have dealing with that sort of base reality.
Because you can't file paperwork in triplicate. There's no subpoenas to file or
911
court
is not
motions.
coming.
I raised a point of
They say,
order.
"Oh, Andrew, that's offensive."
Well, okay.
Yeah,
Who
big
cares?
deal. Yeah.
Whatever. Jack and I actually had a conversation with Ian about old versus new, you know, what's going on, right? And, you know, I brought up the comment that I was actually talking to my 15-year-old son. He was looking at reading the Special Forces Handbook, asking questions, and I got to talking about rally points. You know, like, if we're going to somewhere and we get compromised, we got to come back somewhere, right? We got to meet. If we don't, then we got to go somewhere else. So that's just basically explaining the rally point theory. And then I got into it. I said, you know, his name is Richard. I said, we're different than the newer guys. You know, when people talk about PTSD and everything combined, you know, today, the way they communicate, the whisper mics, this, that. And then I watched the the movie, The Lone Survivor. And, you know, things are blowing up. They're getting shot at and doing those whisper mics. The truth is, if you've ever been in a firefight, I don't know how they work. You can't hear shit. But in the old days, couldn't hear shit either. We didn't have whisper mics, but we used whistles to communicate with. So we would literally go out in the woods or the jungles and spend weeks on end without ever speaking to each other. So it's a totally different environment that allows, and you know, and we're still a brotherhood because of, you know, whether you got it in phase 1, 2, or 3 or in SEER school, you know, it's still a brotherhood. We instinctively or intuitively know how to communicate.
I think, though, you nailed it, though. I think I joke around with my team and I joke, PowerPoint and Excel have destroyed the military.
Oh, God, online training have destroyed.
No, and seriously, it's become, there is way too much reliance on technology and electronics. And the old school basic stuff is what's going to get your ass out of a jam because batteries fail, satellites go down. That's why when we go through selection and the Q course, no one's going through that stuff with a GPS. You got a map and a compass because the GPS
windage and elevation. That
right,
sort of
right,
thing.
right. It's all stuff that you got to do on a not tech level because the reliance on technology is just that. It becomes a reliance.
So you think on
we've
one
had
side...
we've had con ops kicked back to us downrange because they were in the wrong font.
Oh, I've seen that.
I'm not joking. Get your head around that. Get your head around. In World War II, we had guys going in, drawing on a chalkboard.
A little 5-paragraph field order.
Right.
They sit down
on a
under
freaking
poncho in the
sand
middle of the
table
night.
going like this. Here's what we're going to do. Now we've got people up in these headquarters. We've talked about
150 slides.
We've talked about these units that have these officers and all these administrative idiots up there. The briefing product becomes, and you know I'm right, becomes the end to the means, not the mission.
It was like sports. Like it used to be X's and O's on a chalkboard.
Not
now
the
it's
mission.
all this high tech.
That's that product which is designed to fillet some general. That's the only reason why
it is. It is a mental
It's like
masturbation
they
technique.
make you take pictures of your FID training.
Yes.
Or you're training Iraqis.
Oh
or
no, they
Afghanis.
actually you have to turn in storyboards.
And then you think
I'm joking?
What they do is they take all those pictures and turn it into a mosaic. So when they brief the general once a week, those pictures go up in this big mosaic of hundreds of pictures on a slide in front of the general, and he looks at it for 2 seconds and says, "Next slide."
Or he goes like this. He goes, "Why is that guy wearing a Yankees hat?
Yeah, why is he not wearing his PC? Why
is that guy wearing that unauthorized bit of equipment?"
So with
am I right or wrong?
With the shit hits the fan
for real.
scenario and Ebola or EMP, guys with special forces trainings are about old school training versus
They don't
all
teach.
of
They don't
this.
teach Morse code anymore.
No, they don't.
in the
Couple
active
that
course.
with a world
They did when I was in.
you've been to places where the world is just not fair.
Right, the world
Like,
sucks.
do you-
The world
do
is
you-
pretty
do you
shitty,
think
actually.
that our society has gotten so comfortable
Yep.
in this plastic bubble that if it were to burst, there would just be a handful of people who know how to survive, how to thrive, and then say to themselves, "I've seen this before."
There'd be a handful that know how to do it, and then there'd be a handful that actually make the adaptation and are able to leave it behind. A whole bunch of them would do what Jack said, which is just lay down and they shut down. They'd be OBE, overcome by events. They would be overwhelmed. There's a group though that might not know a damn thing, that would reach inside and be able to figure it out and make it, because it's all in us. But that's one group. Then there's the group of us who've done a lot of stuff downrange with minimal equipment, minimal things. We'd be okay too. We'd have a good shot. Then there's another group that's so comfortable out there walking around right now on the way to Starbucks. As soon as it gets taken away, they wouldn't even know what to do.